Hi, everybody. Welcome to TechEd 2021. My name is Arndt Lingscheid. I'm a solution owner within the OCFO's office for cybersecurity and data protection. Today, I've prepared a small presentation for you, just trying to get you more into the topic of how can we protect the intelligent enterprise. And for that, we're just simply going to go through what cyber attacks do we see with on the news at the moment or during the past years? How can we protect the intelligent enterprise and then start giving it a structured approach with the help of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and then start mapping our SAP cybersecurity data protection products into the NIST cybersecurity framework. All right, so take it right away from here. So in general, what we're going to talk about is the intelligent enterprise of SAP. So within the future, you will hardly run all your SAP systems in your own data centers. You will use hyperscalers. You will use SAP as a service provider for running your SAP systems. So you will start using more and more the business technology platform, since SAP will provide more features, functions, and products, solutions for you on the business technology platform. And that's where we have then this great integration layer where all the businesses then can start working together. And how we're going to protect this intelligent enterprise is what we're going to see during this presentation. All right. Are SAP systems under attack, or are they not under attack? That's quite a question that's I've been asked many times from different sorts of people, from customers, from CISOs, from CTOs of organizations. And we just have to quickly wind our head around this topic here and just look at the news. What are they telling us? So they're mainly at the moment shown us ransomware attacks, denial of service attacks. And for sure, SAP systems can be affected by such a ransomware attack or a denial of service attack, but most of the times they're only affected since then operational systems are not working, network components are not working, databases are encrypted, and so on and so forth. But when we look at the news a little bit closer, sometimes we see messages like this and that amount of money has been stolen, or this and that amount of HR information or IP information of an organization has been stolen, or money has been transferred to other bank accounts. And then we just have to think about, so where does these processes are usually been triggered from? Where does this data reside, and how do customers actually access this data themselves? And then we get to the point, well, one way for sure, the data is in the database, the processes, but are on usually inside of an SAP environment, and that SAP environment runs on top of a database or runs on a database and uses the data that is inside of the database. So, but attacking the database directly is, in my opinion, a little bit complicated or complex. So, and we end up with thousands of tables, millions of entries. If the data is not encrypted, then it's very difficult as well to combine it or take it away. So maybe we just think about this a little bit different and try to think, how could we be able to get access to the data directly? Maybe via the S4 system, maybe via the SAP system itself with a high privileged user, for instance. And that is then a way often for hackers into an SAP environment. So the SAP environment is being left open via an open gateway, or you might have firefighter users or other high privileged users that might be hacked, or the passwords might be guessed by the attacker, and then they are able to get into this SAP system. And then for sure, there are inside of the SAP system, they have access to any kind of transaction. They can access any kind of data and just simply download the data or steal via looking just simply at the data. And that's how attacks to SAP systems happen as well. For sure, if I'm such a hacker, I could then as well trigger a ransomware attack from inside an SAP system. That's also possible, but usually that would be lock my access to the data as well, and that is actually the data I wanted to steal when I was the hacker. So it's a little bit unusual, but yeah, for sure could happen as well. And this is how we have to think about it as well. It can happen, and so we have to prevent it somehow. So we have to make sure nobody can enter our SAP systems with such a high privileged user, for instance, and being able then to trigger such activities with inside of the SAP system. All right, going forward with this, helping to secure an SAP environment. SAP does quite a lot with securing the products that we bring to our customers, but we bring as well the guidance here as well, for example, with the SAP Secure Operations Map. And this is the revised version of the Secure Operations Map. It's just been out for a year, something like this, so that's still pretty new. And the old map was actually more technical related. It was only talking about technology and so on and so forth. And this newer version here now really talks, first of all, about the organization and the awareness that an organization must have for being able to protect the whole environment, not only the IT infrastructure environment, but as well the SAP environment, for being able to set up the right security governance for an SAP environment and start doing a complete risk management as well, not only for IT infrastructure, but as well really for the SAP systems. And then this operations map leads us into processes for sure. And then I can start setting up the right processes if I have the right mindset in my organization, if I have the right people on board within my organization, then I can start talking about the processes, the regulatory processes for being compliant, data protection and privacy processes, audit and fraud management, for instance. And only if I have the right setup here with my organization and my people and my processes, I can then start talking about technology like user and identity management, authentication, single sign-on, roles and authorization, custom code security, and so on and so forth. But very important as well for sure is the system hardening. Make sure all the known vulnerabilities are patched within an environment, and not only patched, you have to switch on certain switches sometimes as well to make your SAP system more secure. For example, the gateway security or the RFC security. So you have to, after implementing the patch, you have to switch on this functionality as well. So do the right security hardening here. And then for sure, patch your system as often, as fast as a new patch is out from SAP. You should have to patch your SAP system, since in the moment when SAP delivers a new patch to the market, hackers see this as well. And hackers can start re-engineering the information that is inside of the patch instructions. And with this information, they can re-engineer and build a new exploit for it. And then the exploit is being traded on in the darknet. We've seen this already. And just think about this is a few months back when Microsoft 365 was hacked. Actually, they disclosed the vulnerability, patched all their systems, and it took 3 days for the community to come up with an exploit. And then customers were hacked because they were not able to patch, or they did not patch their Office 365 systems in these 3 days. And so they lost the data there. And that can happen to an SAP environment as well. And so it should not be a discussion with inside of an organization, when can we patch our productive environment? It should be there. The time slot actually should be there already, planned way ahead, before even the patch is being released, for being able to have a short downtime to implement the patch and then keep on running. And as soon as you start doing this, start thinking more about security, put in the patches in a timely manner, think about security hardening, then you can start as well, especially when you look into the S4 environment with security monitoring and forensics, because most of the times organizations don't even recognize that there is something happening inside of their SAP system. I was just talking to a penetration tester a couple of weeks back, and he told me, oh yeah, within the last penetration test, I started doing the penetration test, and I had a look at SU01, that's where you create new users in an SAP environment, and I found out that there is already 5 users inside of the system which completely do not belong into that system because they don't correspond to the naming conventions, they are high privileged users, and so on and so forth. And this organization's already been hacked. And that hacker already created 5 users where he can then log on to the system over and over again, even if one is being found and deleted. And for being able to recognize such activity, you have to do security monitoring and have the ability then in there to do forensic and maybe as well to go for threat hunting. Then we can start talking about the environment, but the environment actually, SAP can only give you an advice because network security, operational systems, database security, client security is more or less a topic that goes to the IT infrastructure. So we can advise here a little bit, but that is most of the times a very well covered topic within organizations already. We can start talking about the SAP depth and breadth supporting the intelligent enterprise. So we had that a picture already at the very beginning. So this is the vision of SAP, how they would see the intelligent enterprise within the future. And we framed this a little bit. How do we secure this intelligent enterprise? So first of all, what we have to think about is, going back a little bit, is really people and processes. If you don't have the right people on board within your organization, if you don't have the right mindset within your organization, you will not be able to trigger the right processes. And only then we can start talking about technology. And technology then often is being discussed as the key factor, but technology can be only do its job when you have the right people and processes in place. And then we can start talking about technology. So in my opinion, this is not the major factor here. The major factor really is people and processes. And then we can start talking about technology, because technology itself will not turn any red flag green. Still mitigation processes that have to be triggered, and then somebody can turn the switch, and then the technology will show you, oh, the setting is being corrected now it's green. Okay, so that circle here actually is then protecting our intelligent enterprise. And when we're trying to leave this circle, we have to go to through the gatekeeper, which is then awareness. And then we can start talking about how we secure the intelligent enterprise. Yes, with identity and access governance, data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, enterprise risk and compliance. So these are more or less the key components you would have to address within an organization. Identity and access governance, I think that's a topic which has been covered by many organizations, more or less, but there's always been a quite high investment in roles and authorizations, single sign-on, privileged user management, and identity and access management. But just think about, if you have a new high privileged user maybe in identity and access management created, maybe it is time now to inform the cybersecurity component on the left-hand side here as well. The threat management component should know that there is a new high privileged user just being created within the SAP system. And then the threat management component will send the information over to data protection and privacy. Maybe we can then mask critical information, sensitive data, so it is not being shown within the UI. And a high privileged user can then not just simply see this information, or a user logs on from a different geolocation. and then the data that he should not be able to access from a different area in the world, then this information just is simply masked within the UI, and the user cannot see it. So you can still be you're still able to be compliant to any types of data regulations, because you don't send this data to a different continent. All right. And for sure, within cybersecurity, data protection, we can then start talking about the different single individual topics like masking and logging, and vulnerability management for the configuration for the SAP coding or the ABAP coding. And for sure, we can start talking about the threat management component, but that's then more the technical details. What I'm trying to point out here with this slide as well is then this circle here does not end with identity access, data protection and privacy and cybersecurity. All of this information has to as well feed into enterprise risk and compliance, since each and every single topic that has been identified within cybersecurity, data protection, privacy, identity and access governance is a topic that should be reported to enterprise risk and compliance, because it is a risk for an organization, and we have to quantify that risk here as well. And only if we quantify the risk, then we can really show to the board level of an organization, hey, this is a threat within your SAP environment, which might cost you this and that amount of money. And this is what we can then do with an appropriate dashboarding for being able to visualize this as well to the board, to the C-level, or to the CISO within an organization. So when drilling down into the single components a little bit deeper, so we get to identity and access governance. And within the identity and access governance area, where I just have drawn a picture of about all of these different types of products that we can find within identity and access governance. And I draw this horizontal line here as well, just to separate them a little bit to the on-prem or private cloud solutions and the cloud solutions that we can offer from the SAP side to our customers. So first of all, we can then start talking about SAP single sign-on to secure the authentication and communication, and just simplify the logon process to an SAP environment. And that helps as well a lot for being more productive for the users, because they don't keep forgetting their passwords. They don't have their passwords written underneath their keyboards, and so on and so forth. That's a huge gain actually for organization having a single sign-on as one of their security or cybersecurity components in here. And then we can start for sure talking about SAP identity management, where we have a business-driven, compliant, entire entity lifecycle management, from hiring to via substitution to promotion and termination of contracts. And then start talking about SAP access control, where we can do then the segregation of duty, manage the access to the SAP systems, monitor, analyze, and maintain those access to the systems as well. So you cannot change from one department to another department and take all authorizations from the older department to the newer department as well. So that should not happen. So you have to maintain or keep on maintaining your roles and authorizations, and withdraw them from the users as well as soon as they change the department, for example, within an organization. For the single sign-on component, there is a companion on the cloud side as well, which is then the SAP Cloud Platform Identity and Authentication Service, which actually has the same functionality then for the cloud components as in single sign-on. And then we have the SAP Cloud Platform Identity Provisioning Service, where we have the whole identity lifecycle built in again, like we have it in SAP Identity Management, and then we can start talking as well about SAP Cloud Identity and Access Governance. So that's the huge product here, where we then have the segregation of duty, access request, design of roles, and analyze the roles, and certify the roles, and there we have the privileged access management built in here too. All right, when drilling down over to cybersecurity and data protection, I just took the bubble of identity and access governance and placed it in here as well, because all of these solutions are kind of integrating more and more with identity and access governance. So first of all, we would have to talk quickly about the SAP Data Custodian here, which is there to monitor and report on the data access. So where is your data? Somewhere in the cloud. So where is it really residing at the moment, and who is accessing this data via the database, for instance? And that's where we can then as well enforce that the data can only be accessed from certain areas, or the data cannot be located to another environment that easy. And that's where we can provide the key management components for encrypting the data as well. So that's what we can do within Data Custodian. And close to this actually then is the UI masking and logging solution from SAP, where we can then really mask values in the UIs, so people cannot access this data. So we can block the data access, and if we cannot block it because the users still have to work sometimes with the data, we can then log the information that a specific user had a look at critical information, sensitive information within in a certain UI. And that's how we can come as well then to SAP Enterprise Threat Detection, because those components play quite closely together, because we can then send the information from Enterprise Threat Detection. Okay, it says something suspicious going on in the SAP environment. Please mask the fields or raise the log level within the UIs. This is what we can then do with Enterprise Threat Detection. Actually, Enterprise Threat Detection is a CM solution tailored to the needs of SAP systems. So we are not looking at IT infrastructure so much, but we are very, very strong on evaluating and analyzing all the different types of logs that are coming from an SAP environment, and having a look at all the different events. And SAP Enterprise Threat Detection then brings as well the semantic understanding of all those different types of logs and log events. That goes actually very close together with SAP Focused Run as well. Focused Run actually is a solution, is a spin-off from Solution Manager, helping our customers organizing and orchestrating the whole operational process for an SAP environment. And within this product, it is integrated already the whole security configuration management for the SAP S/4HANA, for the HANA database, for the NetWeaver releases, for the J2EE, and that's where we can do the patch management as well. And for the code vulnerability, so the coding that customers write themselves, we have the code vulnerability analyzer, and within the code vulnerability analyzer, that's where we can then identify and remedy any kind of security vulnerabilities. All right, hopping on to the enterprise risk and compliance solutions very briefly. That's where we can then find a solution for SAP Business Integrity Screening. So looking more in depth into a business transaction, maybe seeing something like a flip-flopping of bank accounts. So somebody changes a bank account number before an automated payment run, and after the payment run it is being changed back again. So the money in the payment run went somewhere else, but not to the account where it is supposed to. So such things can be found within SAP Business Integrity Screening. And we have the SAP Financial Compliance Management documents and manage all the controls in there, and to demonstrate effective internal controls over financial reportings. And then, of course, we have our 3 lines of defense offering in here as well. And then we can start talking about SAP process control, where we can then put in all different types of controls and raise an alert. And so the process behind this is then being triggered. We have the SAP risk management component and the SAP audit management in here as well. So going forward a little bit here again, we can then start talking about the NIST cybersecurity framework, just to give you a guideline or give organizations a guideline how to manage cybersecurity. So the NIST cybersecurity framework actually is very well known within organizations protecting the IT infrastructure, and it just is a framework to give guidance on best practices and existing standards and so on and so forth. And that helps us then within the pillars of identify, protect, detect, and response. And this is what we can apply to our SAP systems as well, looking at the asset management. What is our business environment? Okay, that's the SAP systems. And then I can start looking at what are the most important SAP systems for being able to have a risk assessment, set up the right risk management strategy, and then go over into the next pillar of protect, and then detect, response, and recover. So that helps us then there quite a lot. And that's where we can then come as well to the mapping of the different SAP solutions into that NIST cybersecurity framework. So where do I as an organization actually start? So a very good point for an organization to start looking at security controls of an SAP environment is actually the early watch service. Been there for 20 years, but it's been reworked quite a lot within the past year, and it gives very, very worthwhile information about many different vulnerabilities that are not closed or not patched within the environment. So it is the substar users or the DDIC users or the unchanged passwords, the open gateways. Sometimes you hear famous names on the news for this, but that's all in the SAP Early Watch Alert service. If you want to refine this, you can go to the SAP configuration validation or system recommendations, or even do it better with SAP Focused Run, which we've addressed already earlier on. And as well, the ABAP Test Cockpit is there to help our customers and organizations, together with the SAP Code Vulnerability Analyzer, to address the coding issues in here. And then for sure, we have the products for SAP Single Sign-On and user and identity management, access management, data custodian. We've talked about this already a little bit. And then so these are the more protective technologies. And then we can step beyond into detect and response, where we can then find SAP Enterprise Threat Detection, but as well UI data protection and masking, and SAP Business Integrity Screening, all fitting nicely into this diagram, which actually then came from the NIST cybersecurity framework, just helping you with this. Having a little bit deeper look into this, we can have a look at the HANA database, where we can find authorizations, as well encryption possibilities, and masking possibilities then there as well. And then all of this actually has to feed into process control, risk management, and into that cybersecurity dashboard that we were addressing at the very beginning of the presentation. And then we can have already a quick look at what we've created until here. So for example, you see the alerts coming up from Enterprise Threat Detection. You see the different events coming into the system, but very important is actually the mapping to the risk that we can see here. And this is where I would like to finish my presentation. I'd like to say bye-bye and take care of you, and have a good look at your SAP environment and make it more secure.